This is an Ielts speaking test simulation. Hello, welcome.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Now, can I find out a little bit about yourself? What's your name?
My name is Raymond Bannister. I'm 54 years old. I'm a mechanical engineer by trade, which I gave up a long time ago to pursue my passion for acting.
Oh, great. And whereabouts are you from?
I live in the eastern suburbs of Sydney, up on the 12th floor of an apartment building with overlooking the city and the coast.
And are you working or studying?
I'm not working at the moment or studying for that matter. I'm trying to pick up acting jobs when I can get them.
Right. Now we're going to move into part 1 of the Ielts speaking test simulation. We're going to talk about acting. Did you enjoy acting when you were younger?
Very much so, yes. I thoroughly enjoyed it. The first acting job I had at the age of 16, I worked with Anthony Perkins, the guy from Psycho, and it was an amazing experience. I didn't know who he was. I'm working alongside this great actor, not knowing who he was, and it was quite funny. It wasn't until I saw the film Psycho on TV 2 years later when I realised who I was working with 2 years prior. It was quite hysterical, actually.
Ah.
Yeah.
And how often do you do acting now?
At the moment, I would say that I get one acting job roughly once every 2 weeks.
Do you have a favourite movie that you love watching regularly?
Well, I wouldn't say I love watching it regularly, but my favourite film of all time would have to be 2001: A Space Odyssey, the great Stanley Kubrick film. To this day, I've never seen anything quite like that. It was made back in 1968, and it really is an amazing film.
And how important do you think award ceremonies are for actors?
Personally, I don't really like them. I never watch the Academy Awards. I think it robs the actor of the true craft of acting, and it's I don't believe acting should be all about glory. I think one should do acting for the love of the art, not for the glory and awards.
Okay, let's move on to part 2 of our speaking test. I'm going to get you to describe a movie actor who you think is very popular. You should say who the actor is, what kinds of movies that they act in, what you know about the actor's personal life, and explain why you think the actor is so popular. You will have to talk for 1 to 2 minutes, and you'll have 1 minute to think about your answers. I'll give you a paper and pen if you'd like to take some notes. Okay, great. Thank you. Now, please tell me about this movie actor.
Okay, I would like to talk about Marlon Brando. He was known as the king of method acting, who perfected the Stanislavski style of acting, which a lot of actors today aspire to be like Marlon Brando, as myself, one of them, and Russell Crowe has always adored Marlon Brando. He passed away in 2004 at the age of 80. He lived his private life was very tragic, actually. His father was an alcoholic and was abusive. His parents divorced when he was quite young. But getting back to the acting side, I think his best film, or the film that I like the best, would have to be On the Waterfront, made in 1954, in which he plays the boxer. That was an amazing film. He was, to this day, I have not seen anybody quite as good as Marlon Brando. I've always aspired to be like him.
Why do you think he's so popular?
Was popular. He was very popular in the 1950s. He was a heartthrob. All the girls were crazy about Marlon Brando back in the 1950s. He did that film in 1979, Apocalypse Now. And I think that was pretty much the the start of his demise, really, with that film. After that, his films weren't as good. He did Superman in 1978. He had top billing. He got top billing for Superman in 1978, and he only had a very small part in the film. Hence, as you may know, Superman at that time was the most expensive film ever made, up until 1978, because Marlon Brando demanded very high fees. And that was one thing that was a bit of a sticking point in Hollywood, is that Marlon Brando often demanded high fees.
Right, very interesting. Right, now we'll move into part 3 of our speaking test simulation. What are the most popular types of movies in your country?
Well, in my country, I think the two most popular types, I'd say three. I'd say science fiction and romance. Yeah, they have to be the two most famous genres of film.
And what do you think the difference is between watching a film in the cinema compared to watching it at home?
Well, in the cinema, you usually have to be very quiet and you can't talk to your partner. You're usually cramped for space. Whereas at home, you can, if you're watching a film at home, if you're watching a video, you can pause, you can stop, you can take a break, you can stretch your legs, cross your legs, you can let your hair down, you can sing a song, you can get up and dance and do all sorts of things that you can't do in the cinema.
Do you think that cinemas will close in the future?
I certainly hope not. I don't see that happening in the very near future. I mean, it has been, people have talked about that for the last 20 or 30 years. They've been talking about cinemas closing down. I mean, drive-ins have closed down. There's hardly any drive-ins left in this country. Cinemas, I hope not.
And I want to ask you a couple of questions about theatre as well.
Sure.
How important is the theatre in your country's history?
Oh, it's extremely important, yes, especially Broadway. Yeah, Broadway, New York, it's since the late 19th century, theatre acting has been a very, very big part in American culture.
And how strong a tradition is it today in your country to go to the theatre?
It's not as strong as it was back in the 1920s, 30s, and 40s. Cinema has pretty much taken over theatre. I mean, people still go to the theatre in America, yes, nowhere near as much as they used to. Usually a cinema ticket is a fraction of the cost of going to the theatre. So, and a lot of people don't like to get dressed up. Usually to go to the theatre, people have to get dressed up. And in America, people don't like to get dressed up. Not like they did back in the old days.
And lastly, do you think that theatres should be run as a business or as a public service?
I think theatres should be run as a business. I think it has been that way since the very beginning, and I think that's what works. That's what works in America, is a private enterprise with theatres. It's worked well so far, and I personally think it should remain that way.
Okay, that ends our speaking test. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you for having me.